The Battle of Algoa Bay, a tense clash in the southern oceans. In the late afternoon of the 20th of September, 1799, the air was thick with tension in the coastal waters of Algoa Bay, off the southeastern tip of South Africa. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, the waters were calm, with a fresh easterly breeze stirring the sails of two British vessels at anchor, the HMS Camel, a converted transport ship, and the sloop HMS Rattlesnake. Neither ship expected any trouble. The Camel, a vessel with a storied history, had been stripped of many of its guns, and now carried only a modest armament, while the Rattlesnake, a lightly armed sloop, was far from prepared for a naval confrontation. But unbeknownst to the British sailors, a formidable threat was making its way toward them. At 4 p.m., the Danish-flagged ship, which had been sailing under a neutral banner, came into view. A large frigate, she slowly made her way towards the two British vessels. At first, the sight seemed unremarkable, yet the situation quickly took a dramatic turn when a local schooner, the Surprise, which had been operating in the bay, came alongside the stranger. After a brief exchange, the captain of the Surprise raced back to shore, desperate to warn the British of the impending danger. The unknown ship was no ordinary vessel, she was the Preneuse, a French frigate, under the command of Captain Jean-Marthe-Adrien L'Hermite. As the Preneuse closed in on the British ships, the gravity of the situation began to sink in. At 6 p.m., with a fading light casting long shadows over the bay, the French frigate unfurled her sails, a clear signal of her intent to engage. The HMS Rattlesnake, now fully aware of the threat, fired a warning shot into the air, but received no response from the approaching ship. Still, the French frigate continued her approach, and the HMS Camel, despite her weakened state, prepared for battle. By 8:30 p.m., the Preneuse was just 500 yards away from the British vessels. The Rattlesnake quickly came into position, bringing its broadside to bear on the enemy. The Camel followed suit. Then, as the French frigate hoisted the tricolour, the unmistakable emblem of the French Navy, the situation was no longer in doubt. The Preneuse was now openly challenging the British presence in the bay. The cannons roared to life. For hours, the two British ships, outgunned and outclassed, engaged in a desperate fight for survival against the French frigate. The Preneuse unleashed a devastating barrage, targeting the Camel with brutal precision. Below decks, the British sailors worked feverishly to maintain their guns and repair the damage that threatened to sink their ships. Meanwhile, the HMS Rattlesnake, despite taking heavy fire, responded with all the fury it could muster. But the Camel was the primary target of the French fire, and it soon became clear that her situation was critical. With her hull pierced by numerous cannonballs, and her masts severely damaged, she began to take on water. The British crew, now struggling to prevent the ship from sinking, were forced to abandon their guns and man the pumps. As the battle raged on, an unexpected stroke of luck came to the British. The wind, which had been steady all day, suddenly shifted. The Camel, struggling to bring its guns to bear, was forced to cut anchor and veer away from the fray. At the same time, the Preneuse, now focusing its attention on the Rattlesnake, continued its barrage. By 3:30 a.m., the French ship ceased firing, perhaps thinking that the British ships had been silenced. However, the Preneuse was not to get away so easily. In an audacious move, the British defenders mounted a bluff that would alter the course of the battle. The soldiers at Star Fort, a newly built redoubt in the area, had hastily mounted 5 cannons on the beach. As the Preneuse made its way toward the open sea, these guns were fired into the night, their thunderous booms echoing across the bay. Though the shots fell short, the noise was enough to convince Captain L'Hermite that the bay was too heavily fortified to risk further engagement. Realizing that his ship was outnumbered and outgunned, L'Hermite cut the Preneuse's anchor cable and made a hasty retreat towards Bird Island, leaving the British vessels battered but alive. The battle had ended, but not without taking its toll. The HMS Camel, though seriously damaged, had survived. Of her 101 men, only 6 were wounded, a testament to the resilience and bravery of the crew. The HMS Rattlesnake had also taken its share of damage, with several crew members wounded or killed, but it too had managed to avoid defeat. Despite their bravery, the British ships had been heavily outgunned. With the odds stacked against them, it was their gallantry, the deception at Starfort, and the resilience of their crews that had won the day. As dawn broke over Algoa Bay, the sight of the French frigate retreating into the distance was a relief, but it was also a reminder of the fragile nature of British power in these waters. The battle, though minor in the grand scope of the Napoleonic Wars, was a pivotal moment in the defense of British interests in southern Africa. The event was soon overshadowed by the grander naval battles of the era, but for those who fought in the waters of Algoa Bay, the memory of that night would remain etched in history as a testament to the courage and resourcefulness of sailors caught in a deadly game of cat and mouse on the high seas.